Welcome to School and Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds, featuring prominent leaders, subject matter experts, and thought innovators with their perspectives on the current challenges facing K-12 education. I am your host, Larissa Napolitan, a former teacher, instructional coach, and a member of the Branching Minds team, here to lead conversations and to shine a light on phenomenal educators and those that are on a mission to transform our schools and the lives of students. Maybe you've been listening for a while, or this is your first episode. If you like what you hear, would you do us a favor by rating and reviewing us on iTunes? This is a fantastic way to tell us you enjoy what we are creating. Also, if you want more MTSS resources, sign up for our weekly newsletter using the link in our show notes, and check out our website for all the blogs and guides you would ever need about MTSS. Whether you're just starting out or looking to refine what you already have, this episode is packed with actionable insights to help you create a comprehensive MTSS handbook that addresses academic, behavioral, and social emotional needs in your district. We're thrilled to have three incredible experts joining us today. First, we'll hear from Sandra Sproul, a professional development consultant at Branching Minds with over 3 decades of experience in public education. And we're also joined by Rhonda French, the District Administrator of Pupil Services for Medina City Schools in Ohio. And we have Jason Trammell, an Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Instruction at Valhalla Union Free School District in New York. Together, this powerhouse panel will walk us through key components of an MTSS handbook, strategies for staff engagement, and ways to align progress monitoring, data collection, and student support. Get ready to take a lot of notes. We have lots of great resources to share with you at the end of the episode. So, Sandra, I'm just going to have you take it away.
Thank you so much for that introduction. We really want to maximize our time together. So we're going to cover key components of an MTSS handbook, Branching Minds recommendations, and also hear from Jason and Rhonda about what was important to them. We're going to talk about the staff that you have and what role they play in the responsibility that they have, both before you start the work, during the work, and after the work of an MTSS handbook. We're going to spend some time talking about how you take all of the aligning of progress monitoring, data collection, strategies, supporting students, how you capture that in your handbook. And then a big part of this, since we're talking about multi-tiered systems of support, how do we make sure that we're not just addressing students' academic needs for support, but we're wrapping around those students with both academic, behavior, and social emotional supports. You may be just starting a handbook. You may be have one completed. Our goal today is to equip you and to empower you so that no matter where you are, some of you may have one completed, but you may find some pieces that you need. And let's just get into the work today. We want to really give you lots of things from Jason and Rhonda and some things from Branching Minds. I counted up the other day and I thought, well, how many districts have I supported in this work? I've supported 15 districts on behalf of Branching Minds in putting together an MTSS handbook. And so when we start out with a district, we give them a sample, right? What are the components that we as Branching Minds suggest be in a handbook? And so we have these 7 sections that we look at as we do this work with the district. As I'm working with the school district, we go in, we look at data on their school, strengths, challenges, opportunities, threats, and start to craft goals. Then we look at each of those sections that you saw that we recommend that is in a handbook, and we start to review and align that district's practices with what best practices are or what we might suggest. Then from that, we go in each of those sections and we start to create processes, right? I'm there, a team is there to give guidance. And then at the very end of all that hard work, we develop a clear implementation plan so that our staff on our campus, in our district, can really utilize that handbook to support students and support their staff. We go in, the very first thing we go, we need goals, right? What is the purpose of this handbook? Who's going to use the handbook? What are they going to use it for, and when are they going to interact with it? So we take all these pieces and then we ask the team, in order for our staff, our people to use this handbook, what does it need to include? What do we need to capture? So that's the first thing you're going to hear from Rhonda and from Jason about is, in order to make this handbook usable, they're going to share with us what they wanted to make sure they captured in their handbook. So I'm going to pass it off first to Rhonda, and she's going to talk to us a little about the Medina City Schools Handbook. So, Rhonda, I am passing it off to you.
Okay, sounds good. So, hi everybody. For reference, I am a Pupil Services District Administrator. MTSS, Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, including Social Emotional Learning and PBIS, fall under my department. We have an administrative team, we have MTSS coaches, and we also have a behavioral consultant. So, when I refer to our team, that's what I'm referring to. Also, for reference, Medina is a suburb in Northeast Ohio, and we have approximately 6,500 students. When I came into our district, as mentioned, I've been in Medina for 7 years, and we had a handbook when I got here. So I'm glad to hear that we were a little bit ahead of our time. So we've had a handbook for almost a decade now, about 10 years. But I will say that when I came into the district 7 years ago, our handbook only focused on academic components. So in the past 7 years, our handbook has transformed significantly. I saw some people in the chat say, we have a handbook, but it hasn't been updated in a long time. And I'll go on to say later that a handbook should really be a dynamic document. Positions change, programs change, and all of that really does need to be reflected in your handbook. So, like I mentioned, our handbook has changed. It reflects new intervention strategies, the new coaches that we have implemented, but really at its core, multi-tiered systems and its philosophy as it relates to implementation in our district has really not changed. MTSS is a shape, probably a triangle, that results in increasing or decreasing levels of student support. That's based on screening, diagnostic assessments, along with continual progress monitoring data. So that's what MTSS is at its core, and you should reflect that in your handbook. And then you go on to differentiate how really your practices in your district need to align with the handbook. We also do emphasize the importance of Tier 1 instruction. I was just at our department meeting. I came from there to here with our admin team and our MTSS coaches. And something our MTSS coaches always say is that you can't intervene yourself out of a Tier 1 problem. When a teacher, administrator, parent, someone is having concerns about student performance, our MTSS coaches begin with an observational assessment of Tier 1 practices. The MTSS process is valuable, but it won't meet your needs, and your manual and your handbook are not going to make much of a difference if you begin with inefficiency. So you have to make sure that your bottom tier, your foundation, your Tier 1 practices are solid. Beyond that, within our manual and our handbook, we do reflect the structure of a Tier 1 team, which for our purposes in Medina include administrator, teachers, counselors, psychologists, and MTSS and behavioral coaches as necessary. From there, similar people participate in Tier 2 and Tier 3 meetings, but counselors prioritize Tier 2 and psychologists prioritize Tier 3. There's also one really important component that we highlight in our handbook, and that's the parent contact and parent component. We developed a MTSS parent consent form that functions as an interview form. So if a teacher is comfortable with the process, they'll call home or have an in-person meeting, express concerns, get verbal or send home for written consent, and have a quick parent interview along with the consent process to be able to gather more information. And that's one part of our handbook that we are really proud of. The final thing about our handbook that I'll share is that it's a work in progress, as all handbooks should be. And I'll share one thing that we want to do to level up. And that's to revamp our referral form process. So we revised the handbook before we began with Branching Minds district-wide. So as you heard, I'm a Branching Minds Pathfinder. We are a Branching Minds partner, and we have that in our district. And if all of your data is available in Branching Minds, it really does eliminate the need for a referral form. Your team should continually be looking at data to determine involvement with the MTSS process for students. So especially as it relates to advances in technology, there's a lot of paperwork and documentation that can be refined or eliminated to be able to improve your process. In the past, we have found that our referral form, which is very comprehensive, but it's also kind of cumbersome too. So that's how we're hoping to level up and improve our handbook moving forward.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. I appreciate just your clarity in what was important for you to capture in your handbook. And so we're going to throw it over to Jason next. So, Jason's handbook is actually a website. And so he's going to share a little bit about that work and what they have captured in their handbook.
So I hope everybody. Thanks, Sandra. For us, we're much newer in our journey. We actually contracted with Branching Minds at the end of last year in June, and this is where we are now. We're in a much shorter timeline, and we're also a much smaller district. I have approximately 1,400 total students and approximately 10 to 11 administrators district wide. A lot of MTSS lives in my world, but also dives into our director of special education. But we're under two different houses. To that end, ultimately, for a handbook to be as successful as possible, it needs to be clear and user-friendly for our teachers, our staff, and most importantly, those parents at home that might be a little confused about what the process truly is. This needs to support all stakeholders. And at the end of the day, it has to tie in with fidelity. So while we might not be as far along as Rhonda and her team, we are really excited about what we provided for our community here in Valhalla. We had that 20-page document that was really difficult to sift through. And what we wanted to do was create something that was more user-friendly. We needed to establish a clear mission and vision. And that clear mission and vision really indicates the voices of our school community. To that end, that multi-tiered prevention system, as Rhonda talked about before, that triangle base, making sure that solid foundation is available for teachers and staff, along with our parents, and really recognizing where they fall in the pendulum of academic, sports, and behavioral supports. Moving forward is really identifying what that support plan cycle looks like and truly identifying what our cuts are for certain aspects of our program. And then as we move forward, our staff roles and responsibilities, really targeting what people are working with and what they're working towards, how they're working together, again, to support all students. And then lastly, a parent resources page. Really trying to fine tune how our parents can see where they can go, what they need to do. So ultimately, at the end of the day, clear, user friendly, and forever changing, because we really need to adapt to what our students need in that moment of time.
I love that both of you have a very different look to those, but what was important, you shared a commonality in what was important for you to capture. So we're going to continue on. So they shared a little bit about their handbooks. They're going to share more as we break down some of these pieces just a little bit further. You heard both Rhonda and Jason talk about staff roles and responsibilities. And when we come in as a company and work with a school district in developing this handbook, we think about those roles and responsibilities of our staff in before we even start it. We need to think about who is going to be on this team. Both Rhonda and Jason have teams that give input because, like both of them said, these are living, breathing, growing documents. Then during that handbook development, we're defining roles within that handbook. So during that whole time, we're defining roles, thinking about our staff and what their role is in different areas. And then after that handbook is complete and we've kind of finalized it, when and where and how is our staff going to actually be expected to interact with that handbook? So, a lot going on as far as staff roles and responsibilities. And we're going to hear from Jason and Rhonda as they talk to us about who they have involved in this process, what it looked like before they started, how does it look like in the middle of the work, and then what that should look like after. So this time I'm going to start with Jason and kind of let you share about those staff roles and responsibilities. I know we saw it in your handbook.
Absolutely. So when we create this handbook, it's only as effective as the individuals that you hear from and that they're a part of. So it's ultimately a collaborative process across all of our school community. For us in Valhalla, we had instructional support teams that were taking place on a daily basis, building to building. And what we wanted to do is bring together an overall community of stakeholders K through 12 for our before, our during, and our after. And for our before, we really needed to define goals and gather input while establishing collective ownership. And that consisted of our district admins, our MTSS coordinators, our teacher leaders, special education, ENL, related service providers, and family liaisons. Ultimately drafting sections and teams, reviewing for clarity, consistency, and alignment, vetting tools, templates, and interventions, and getting feedback. This was an ongoing process, and one of the big misses that we had here in district was an overwide data collector, and that's where Branching Minds came in, along with Sandra and her team to help us establish that handbook. That during phase was those MTSS team members really curating through the materials that we were collecting, really fine tuning with our district-wide screener how we can best support our students and what kind of drill downs we could have further. We created something called an if-then statement. If a student fell here, then a student received this. And I think that was our greatest take home because we could really fine tune what students were receiving what, when, and where. And then lastly, for us, ultimately, we have to constantly review. As Sandra said, as Rhonda said, this is a living, breathing document, and nothing can ever be set in stone. We must be really fluid when we're supporting our students because the whole point of an MTSS process is supporting the individual. And those individuals, those students sitting in the seats with us every single day are the most important. For us, overall, it's been an evolving process. That original district team has changed since because we want as many different voices in the seats and we want as many different people a part of the process for our community. And we're actually in our third iteration of changing our team just so we get continued buy-in across the board for our students.
Rhonda, let's hear from you about how you engaged your staff and determined the roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, and so honestly, in relation to roles and responsibilities of staff who we had involved, Jason really summed it up pretty well. We really needed to ensure that we had all stakeholders represented because, in relation to staff, all stakeholders related to staff were represented because they're the ones, using the handbook and living and breathing the processes. We have had committees to create and amend the handbook. So as I mentioned, I came into the district, we had a handbook. There was a pretty big committee that created it. There was a pretty big committee that amended it. But now that it's our department, we have ourselves, our admin team, and then our coaches who make those smaller changes. So really, again, like Jason said, it's a dynamic document. It does involve, we try not to change it too often, but we do want to reflect those current practices. MTSS has been around a long time, so the theory and philosophy of it doesn't really change, but everything I mentioned at the beginning, people, interventions, programs, that really needs to be accurate and up to date. There's no quicker way to lose credibility in a reference document than for it to be outdated. And when I was talking before, I did mention leveling up. So that's something where, we've had our handbook for a long time. So that's something we're trying to do with it is really level up our practice. And something that I would like to see more of in our handbook is incorporation of parents and families. I would like, and students as well. I'd like that to be a more comprehensive document and include their input as well as to what the practices and policies and procedures should be.
So kind of from both of you, I'm hearing the importance, and I agree with you, the importance of a variety of stakeholders that have input. And like you were saying, Rhonda, it is keeping it up to date, right? Having those staff members that help make sure it's up to date and that it's valid in its use. And so it is a constant work. Like I think most people think, oh, we have it done and we don't have to look at it again. But you're constantly having to revisit the work and engage your staff in it. So let's talk about capturing our strategies that we're utilizing with students, how we are collecting data on our students, supporting them through progress monitoring. When we are working with a district, right? When we are working with a district, we want our staff, our educators, to be able to accurately find and locate students who need support. We want them to be able to put in plans that support student growth and find those interventions that they'll use in order to support those students. So there's this constant cycle happening of identifying those students, creating plans, implementing those support plans, and adjusting them. And so that can be a challenge when trying to capture that in a handbook that is user friendly and that staff who interact with it are actually able to put into practice. So, a couple resources that you're going to have in that resource page are actual resources that we use with school districts when we are implementing a handbook. On the left hand side is what we call our synopsis. And I saw that synopsis on the Valhalla site. I have one district in New York that this synopsis is the basis for their whole handbook. They have links that come off of this synopsis on the left. So we have that synopsis that you have access to that's going to just help simplify some of those complex decisions that you're currently having to make. On the right is the flow chart. You saw both Medina and Valhalla had their own version of a process flow chart. Again, each step being rooted in data, in fidelity, in a student centered approach. So when your staff members have either a synopsis or a flow chart, it's one of the first things I try to do with the district, then your staff can really see and make sure that students are getting the support they need at just the right time. And so that's a lot to capture, but we're going to have both Jason and Rhonda share with us challenges that they faced in capturing, right, that alignment of that process in their handbook. So I'm going to send this over to Rhonda.
There are so many differences in the way MTSS is implemented in primary versus secondary. And I actually completely forgot about it until this moment. But when I came to the district, our handbook was an elementary handbook and a secondary handbook. I will say that did end up leading to a lot of inconsistent practices district wide. And we really wanted to refine that. And so initially, the initial iteration of our handbook was divided into primary or elementary and secondary versions and did not contain social emotional learning in any capacity. So over the past 7 years, we have really worked to ensure that practices are consistent through one handbook and differentiated as needed. So that's not saying the exact same things happen at the elementary level and the secondary level, but and when we're talking about a guiding light, theory and philosophy and overarching ideas, we wanted it really to flow the same at all levels. So when we're talking about parent consent doesn't look different at the elementary and the secondary levels. It is the same. The other thing that we've done, there's a lot of work that happens outside the handbook. And so we've developed a local SEL curriculum using social thinking methodologies and other resources. We've implemented SEL screening through DESA and Branching Minds. So our handbook has really had to make the progress that we have had to make. And so from the beginning of our handbook, nearly a decade to now, instruction has changed. Science of reading has become a thing, and we were using outdated resources. So because of that, we really needed to make sure we were getting with the times. And right now, our MTSS coaches, we have 3 district-wide primarily handle that. They are general education teachers who joined our team 2 years ago, and their input is we really value their input as a team. So over time, we faced a lot of challenges in the beginning. There are still challenges for us to tackle, but it is important to continue to make those improvements over time.
Yeah, for me, piggybacking on that, greatest hurdles overall: aligning intervention, progress monitoring, and data collection. And again, kudos to Branching Minds. My staff hears about them at nausea. But like 6 points for me overall is the inconsistent use of interventions across schools and grade levels. So making sure that all my buildings are fully aligned and not siloed. The fragmented data systems needed to be broken down. We needed to make sure that everything was collected consistently. A limited digital infrastructure for data tracking, a lack of systematic progress monitoring, varying understanding of MTSS language and processes. So really educating our teachers and staff about what should be taking place in our classrooms on a daily basis. And then that disconnect between tiered supports and core instruction. Rhonda spoke to it, really making sure that we emphasize tier 1 best practices and professional learning connected to MTSS strong core instruction. So for us, again, we're in a much different journey right now. So we're seeing a lot of the issues that we're coming from with AIS and RTI and moving towards MTSS. But it all comes down to aligning intervention, progress monitoring for students, and overall data collection in a consistent fashion across K-12.
And looking for me at both of your guides, you guys both laid out very clear. You both have a flow chart. Like you were saying, Rhonda, you've captured that tier 1 instruction that is so important. And so as I look at both of yours, I just see that any staff member could go to your handbook and see how the flow of support should look so that you can make those really clear decisions about when and where and why you're going to support your students. And to what you were saying too about let's get out of being fragmented, and inconsistent. And this is just allowing that inconsistency. Anything else that pops into either of your heads? But the next thing we want to talk about, and both Rhonda and Jason have talked about the fact that, there was a time when we're talking about RTI and we're talking academic, right? Supporting students academically. But that's not the case, right? When we're talking about supporting students in MTSS, we're talking about behavior and social emotional supports. And so we're talking about the whole child, right? Providing those tiered level supports, learning supports, enrichment opportunities, intervention. We want to provide the maximum support we can for students, not just one component of it. So it is a big, big challenge to not focus on one area, but to make sure that we are consistent in supporting students in all these areas. And remember, we talked about that cycle earlier of evaluating the data, defining and finding out what that problem is, analyzing the data, and then implementing support. So Jason and Rhonda are going to share a little bit about steps they've taken in Medina, steps they've taken in Valhalla in order to ensure that consistency of that wraparound support in all those areas of MTSS. So I'm going to give it to Jason first.
Yeah, so that consistency, that wraparound, it really is a great reflection question. One that really gets to the heart of what MTSS is, and that it's a system. It's not just a set of strategies. It really can help frame the steps that we should be taking to ensure consistency for our students with that wraparound support, academic, behavioral, and social emotional. And ultimately comes down to what our shared vision is for MTSS within your own personal district. Just like every classroom, just like every building, just like every district, it has a different heartbeat. You need to make sure that heartbeat fits with your current model. You can't take Valhalla, you can't take Medina and put it somewhere else. You really have to make it fit your model, your kids, your community. So really anchoring it in a vision statement. You really need to have a cross-functional team collaboration. I talked about silos before. You really can't have just district admin working on this. You can't just have support. Everybody needs to have a voice in the process. we really need to have a fully functional integration of data systems across multiple domains, because we should have multiple on and off ramps for students. We should have multiple on and off ramps and support for our teachers. Truly finding a way to map tier supports holistically, like really matching those interventions for the right student need, emphasizing that team-based problem-solving model. What does your building level teams, or how do your building level teams meet and communicate on student support? Are we bringing in the right people at the right time? I know for us here, it's a change that we've made to support students across the board, but then ultimately support the teachers in getting them the additional help they need for their classrooms. Building a very powerful professional learning around said integration. It can't be like we just had Branching Minds come in. Here's the platform, start using it. Really building up a powerful professional development model for our teachers and staff. And then lastly, and most importantly, is ensuring accessibility and clarity. We need to make sure that we're defining what MTS is, what it means for our teachers, what it means for our students, and ultimately what it means for our learning community.
Thank you, Jason. And that's a challenge. And as we've been talking, Rhonda and Jason, no matter what size your school, you want to have some processes in place so that there's just that consistency. We're all supporting, we're all looking at data, and we're all supporting those students following that same process. Rhonda, what do you want to share?
I'll start with the same thing Jason did, and everybody get the box of tissues out and just recognize that every student really deserves the support that they need, academically, socially, and emotionally. By developing and utilizing a handbook, you're creating a foundation for the work that allows struggles to be met with solutions. And so MTSS is really just an efficient problem solving model. A handbook is not the end all be all, but it makes MTSS practical and sustainable by clearly outlining the roles, processes, and expectations. So it can become just the go-to resource that helps staff be able to respond efficiently and effectively. And so every kid can get what they need. There are some things that we had to really clean up over time, and it was ensuring that we defined our core components. We outline clear expectations for tier 1, 2, and 3. We have cut scores. We use percentiles. We look at our social emotional screener, for example, and every student below the 16th percentile. A plan needs to be in place for all of those kids. We use office referrals. We use rates of improvement when we're looking at movement through the tiers. Since a lot of people have no handbook or, have just started the handbook process, I will say that the first steps are probably creating a team, getting some data to look at. At the very basic level, those are the things that you need to begin with. And then you can work on defining your core components. But you really need a group of people comprehensively and adequately looking at data to make those systematic decisions.
It made me think about large school, small school, beginning with that resource mapping. That's one of the things that we do. We map out all of our resources for intervention support, all of our resources in assessments. And so, as you're looking at some of these resources that we've shared, just really mapping out what you already have available for tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 support. And like you said, Rhonda, what's the data that we're using to make those decisions and get that brought in and get that written down? Jason, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's really it. And Rhonda mentioned this before, and if you don't have that handbook, and I think we said this on our call another time, you don't have the handbook, get it started. Truly, it really is important because you're doing this for the students in your building, you're doing this for the students in your district. And just make sure you ground everything in evidence. That's ultimately what it's all about. We want to make sure that our students are progressing across the board. And I'm reading these questions. What percentile do you use, or schedule, etc. Those are those conversations that will ultimately lead once that handbook's being created. There might be an adjustment to a schedule. We had to adjust some of our schedules here. There might be an adjustment to what kind of elective and exploratories to benefit certain students. Those are conversations that will have to happen because ultimately you're supporting all of your students.
you find those gaps when you're doing this work. That made me think about how when you're doing this work of creating a handbook, you start to find gaps and then you can fill those in. You know where you need to fill in some gaps. Okay, so let's go into kind of this last piece. You've seen the components that both Jason and Rhonda have with their school districts in their handbook. You have that table of contents that we utilize when a Branching Minds learning facilitator goes in there to help a school district with their handbook. We've talked about how your staff interacts before as you're bringing them in, during developing that handbook, and then after that handbook, aligning those practices, accessing that synopsis or that flow chart, and letting that kind of help you start your thinking about what you want to capture for your district, and then thinking about how you can bring in all areas that students need to support, academic, social, emotional, and also that behavior. After all that's done, right? You've done that work. Um, you've got a rough draft or you're close to a finished product. Then what we do, whether it's Valhalla or another school district, one of our facilitators will go in and we'll bring in a group of people that are going to look at the work that's been done. And so in our final stage of the work, it is when we start to plan for implementation. We get a group of people who look at the work and they think about how is this going to resonate with people emotionally? How will it resonate with people logically and practically? This is called heart, head, hand. And we go in and we have these conversations about the handbook that we have developed, and we get input on that. And then there you see you have access to this leadership protocols. Then we can talk about, okay, what are our long term goals? Like 2 years down the road, what do we want to see happening with this handbook? What are some strengths and challenges that we know we have? And then how do I craft strategies for success? So I want to hear from, kind of Jason and Rhonda as we finish up and we talk about, okay, we've done all this work, we've created this handbook, and it is a lot of work. How do you face just implementing it with your staff, right? So, how do you kind of get to that finish line? What are some things you've done to really uh, empower your staff to utilize this handbook? So, I want to let's hear from Rhonda first.
Two of the bigger things that we did were bring MTSS coaches onto our team. So 2 years ago, we added 3 MTSS coaches to our department. As the Pupil Services Department, we are a Director of Pupil Services, Assistant Director of Pupil Services, Special Education Coordinator, Behavior Consultant, and our 3 MTSS coaches. Before our MTSS coaches, we didn't have any general education representation. So how can we, and how do we have any credibility as, mostly special education staff, I would think in a certain sense, how do we tell general education teachers how to intervene if we don't have general educators on our team? I know that's a loaded question, but we felt like it was really important to add people with a different perspective than we have to help teachers be able to implement interventions. So that was one of the things that we did. And then we also purchased Branching Minds. So, adding those coaches and adding Branching Minds have really helped us. I keep saying level up, have really helped us level up our practice the past couple years. There's still a lot of work to be done. I know Jason really, he hyped me up at the beginning and said, "Oh, we've been doing this forever." But, this is still definitely a work in progress, and there's still lots of things that need to be done. But those, I would say, are the 2 things that have really been impactful the past couple years for us.
That's great. Someone had mentioned, when we go through this implementation, and I know both of you, you're getting feedback, and then you're going back to the handbook and making changes based on feedback. So, I think when we talk about implementation and goal setting, it may that we're not sending it out to the whole district yet. Sometimes we've got another controlled group that's helping us continue to fine tune that handbook till we get it to just where we're ready to then send it out. Okay, Jason, go ahead and talk about implementation for you guys.
Yeah, so Rhonda, I'm going to say again, like long-term goal, I want to be like you and your team, and that's really what it is. To get to that next level, this year, again, in year one, fully for us, we focus solely on the academic. While we do use Ruler within our school district, we want to integrate it fully with DESA, which we have not integrated yet. So we haven't actually established some of those cut scores in district. Again, we were lucky enough to partner with Branching Minds last June, and we're already here. A lot of work has gone into this, and kudos to my teachers and staff, those parents, those students that are a part of the process. And ultimately, it's forever going to be a long-term goal and a long-term journey because we're ever adapting. We look at some of those areas of strength and we recognize them. But as I spoke to before, an area of weakness for us was having some dedicated people that Rhonda was talking about. We still don't have those, but we redefined what schedules looked like K through 8. And we added some of those interventionists by just tweaking a little bit. And that was in one single year. So if we continue to fine tune those processes and really dig deeper with our team, we're ultimately making huge gains on behalf of the district K through 12. But it's forever a process, and one that, we'll keep moving that flag forward with because it's on behalf of our kids. And that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. I appreciate, the insight that you've given, no matter if you're being guided through this work. Like you say, Jason, it's a long process with, you and myself and your district, Rhonda with her team, as they had something in place and now they continue to, identify strengths and weaknesses and fine tune that handbook. The goal is to get to that finish line because the winners in all of this are going to be the students. And we want to really empower that staff to follow best practice in supporting those students.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for all sharing your insight and your experience. And like I said, we have lots of great resources in the show notes. Check those out. And thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to Schoolin' Around, a podcast hosted by Branching Minds. Go ahead and subscribe to our feed wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget, if you are enjoying our content, would you do us a favor and rate and review our podcast on iTunes? This helps others find our podcast and lets us know how much you love what we're creating. Branching Minds is an educational technology company using learning sciences and technology to help districts effectively personalize learning through MTSS. To learn more about us, check out our website, branchingminds.com, or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn @Branching Minds.